Hello, I'm Bob Trubshaw. I'd like to talk to you today about Anglo-Saxon settlements and how, in fact also why, they move upstream. This also provides an example of how a notion, originally quite practical and pragmatic, evolved into something of a more mythological nature. It actually all started rather suddenly. Sometime about 10 years ago, I was sitting in my office, which at the time was in a cottage on the line of the Neolithic Henge Bank at Avebury in Wiltshire. I was reading an academic paper written by Peter Jordan, outlining his research with the semi-nomadic Khanty people of western Siberia. Jordan stated that they live in wooden riverside huts, but only during the winters. He then included a brief remark that when these riverside huts need replacing, then the new hut is built upstream of the previous one, if only by a few metres. Not to do so would be considered unlucky. Now, Peter Jordan offers no explanation, but presumably this is part of a worldview which, for entirely practical reasons, associates upstream with abstracting clean water and downstream with disposing of foul water. Makes good sense. You really don't want to have effluent contaminating the water used for cooking and so forth. And it's not just in Siberia. In a rather erudite academic paper published in 1982, Daniel Melia discussed the complex status of water in medieval Irish legal disputes. These usually were quarrels between mill owners. He tentatively concluded that upstream water was thought of as nobler or more senior. Now, as I read Peter Jordan's remarks, a fairly bright light bulb went on inside my mind. Almost literally across the road from my office was the site of a middle Anglo-Saxon settlement. It was discovered when they built what's now the village primary school. And that settlement was upstream by a few hundred metres from an earlier Anglo-Saxon settlement. That's discovered when they created the main visitors' car park at Avebury. Intriguingly, upstream of both these sites are the scant remains of the now deserted medieval village, probably occupied during the 13th and 14th centuries. All three of these occupation sites are on the eastern bank of the Bourne. The modern village of Avebury is a combination of the Middle Anglo-Saxon settlement, plus later buildings to the east around the main road from Devizes to Wroughton and Swindon. The red lines on this map indicate the probable location of the defensive earthworks, the eponymous Burr or Bury, which would have existed in the Middle and later Anglo-Saxon period. Just for added bonus, less than a mile downstream of the earliest Anglo-Saxon settlement was a Roman small town, close to Swallowhead Springs, where the south-flowing Winterbourne turns sharply east and is then known as the Kennet, flowing in an almost exactly easterly direction towards Reading, where it joins the Thames. The Roman small town to the south of Avebury is next to Silbury Hill, a massive mound constructed towards the end of the Neolithic. The Roman small town was discovered after a large hole developed in Silbury Hill in May 2000, and archaeologists surveyed the surrounding area to work out where substantial amounts of contractors' equipment could be operated without causing undue damage to underlying archaeology. To their surprise, the geophys revealed this substantial town, seemingly with foundations and such like preserved just inches below the grass. This Roman settlement is on the east-west route from London to Bath, a Roman road which evolved into the modern A4, although to the west of Silbury Hill the Roman road ran to the south of the modern A4. After the initial thoughts about the Khanty superstition that bad luck to build downstream, and recognising this was akin to Avebury's settlement sequence, my memory then recalled that about sometime in 1998 I was standing within a massive archaeological excavation at Kettleby, which is to the west of Melton Mowbray in Leicestershire. This dig was ahead of building a factory to make sandwiches and so-called food to go. Preliminary archaeological investigations had included fieldwalking, which identified immense amounts of Anglo-Saxon pottery, something almost without parallel in Leicestershire at that time. Back in 1998, very generously, the dig director, Neil Finn, gave me a personal tour. And two things stand out in my recollections of his remarks. One was that in addition to numerous Anglo-Saxon houses, they'd also gone deeper and found an entirely unexpected Bronze Age ritual site underneath, just to add to the fun. And more relevantly, he tentatively dated the Anglo-Saxon houses as being the oldest in the west and newer to the east. Now, the site of a now deserted medieval village was just a bit further east, outside the excavation area. All the sites are on the southern side of the River Reek, once known as the River Eye, and the Reek flows from east to west. So, once again, there is a direct parallel to the Anglo-Saxon settlements at Avebury, as the newer buildings are upstream, by a few yards, from their precursors. This photograph shows the post holes from one of the high-status Anglo-Saxon timber halls at Kettleby. This building is part of the later stages, so it sits between the earlier buildings and where the later medieval village would be created. And those parallels actually get better. In a recent email, Neil Finn drew my attention to a large Roman settlement a little way further downstream at Kirby Bellers. Now, some evidence for Roman occupation had been discovered in the 1960s, but it was only field walking across the winter of 2022 that revealed the settlement area had been much more extensive than previously thought. And there are other parallels in the East Midlands for such upstream shifts. A recently discovered Roman villa near Ketton is 2 miles downstream from the early Anglo-Saxon church, known at the time as a minster, at Luffinham. Luffinham, sleepy little village now, but was the administrative centre of Rutland until the Norman Conquest, when a castle was built at Oakham and the administration was relocated. The Roman villa would have administered a large area a few centuries before the Luffinham minster. Now, I plan to do a video specifically about the location of early minsters on rivers, but probably not for a few months. If you're impatient, then in the comments below there's a link to a rather detailed and, well, frankly long-winded PDF. Intriguingly, there was another early minster at either Kettleby or more probably Kirby Bellers. But there's little documentary evidence, as it was quickly superseded by an early minster at Melton Mowbray, and that church evolved into the current parish church for Melton. No surprise when I say that Melton is upstream of this earlier minster at Kirby Bellers or Kettleby. And let's get back full circle to Wiltshire. Another early minster, this time at Foxley, had a very short life once another minster was established, again upstream, at Malmesbury. Now, I do accept that there's a good possibility that the moves to Melton Mowbray and to Malmesbury were for entirely pragmatic reasons, such as a better combination of road and water transport, or just a safer place to ford the river. But maybe Anglo-Saxons of the conversion era thought, like the later medieval Irish people, that upstream was nobler, or more senior. And while this custom of shifting settlements may well have originated as a way of avoiding effluent contaminating drinking water, over the centuries it seems to become, shall we say, mythologised. Now, if you know of any similar upstream sequences of Anglo-Saxon settlements, especially if there's a Roman site downstream, then please email me. In the description below you'll find my email address.